Today I've got my new MSI gaming laptop, model number GL65 9SC. This particular one has a i5 9300H with a GTX 1650 4GB, a 512GB WD Blue NVMe SSD, and 8GB of DDR4. But one of the key things that this has is also its 120 Hz IPS level 1080 resolution screen, which is a slim panel. It's a 15.6 inch screen, but is meant to be comparable to most 14-inch laptops out there. So to begin with, I'll talk about the 15.6 inch 1080 120 Hz panel. This does apparently have an IPS level rating, which personally, finding from the viewing angles of this, I will definitely agree with that. Viewing it left to right, I find that there's no real color shifting, invertingness going on. Same when also looking at it vertically as well. The brightness of the panel I find to be perfectly good, even though it can get extremely dim with the brightness turned down, which may be good watching it or watching videos at night or just gaming at night. The biggest issue I did have was the 120 Hz panel. Moving the mouse around on desktop, you could definitely tell it was 120 Hz. But the biggest drama I had was with video games, where you definitely get a lot of blurring going on. And while I'm looking at it, let's cut to the webcam. So this is just a quick test of the MSI laptop webcam and microphone. Overall, turn the resolution up and the frame rate has died completely. And the microphone itself, well, it's an inbuilt microphone in a laptop. The laptop itself is using a SteelSeries keyboard, which MSI have had now for some time. It is only red, and that's all it's available in, and they are just plastic membrane buttons. But the keyboard, the key travel I like, they don't feel too spongy, so overall I've been pretty happy with the keyboard considering. The biggest thing that I don't like is the lack of Windows key on the bottom left hand corner, where you've only got a function button. But turns out with the actual included MSI software, you can switch the function button with the Windows key. Also, while we're looking at the function section, here is the 3 stages of brightness for the keyboard. Off, 1, 2, 3. And now I'll freeze the frame here and just give you an idea of how the keys may sound on your model of laptop. But the louder taps that were happening there was the spacebar, with the other ones just being the various letter keys. Also, to give you an idea of the left and right click. Another odd issue I have with this machine is the left and right click buttons do seem physically too large, which is a problem I never thought I would have on a laptop. But if I'm on the far right hand side of the right click, I've got to make a conscious effort to get over to the left hand side. Another common thing I see is the one finger lid open test, which this one definitely does not pass. Mainly because the weight of the machine is relatively light, so it definitely doesn't have the weight to stay stable as you open it. So 2 hands, definitely the preferred method to open this one. Another thing to note on the back of the LCD display is the MSI Dragon logo, which is adjustable along with the backlight. So it's not an independently lit thing, it's just a passively lit thing using the backlight from the LCD display. While we're here, I'll move on to I/O. On the right hand side, in this poor quality footage is 2 USB 3 ports along with a full-size SD card slot and also the DC jack. The DC jack itself I do find in an inconvenient spot, mainly because I'm a right-hand gamer. I usually do it on the couch with a board underneath the laptop, and I find with that restricted space that I'm constantly, or have a higher chance of hitting the charger port, which I'd much rather if that was on the back of the machine, but it's a small price to pay. And on the left hand side we have a microphone jack, a headphone jack, Type C, not Thunderbolt, USB 3, display port, HDMI and Ethernet, and also a bit of ventilation, and I believe it's called a Kensington lock on there too. And on the back of the machine is just purely ventilation, so vents from both sides, and also over in the middle there we have a bit of red trim, which is purely for looks. Internally I've been quite impressed with the cooling that this has. Definitely enough copper, I find that perfect. Definitely the style of cooling I'd like to see in most laptops. Does also have a single M.2 NVMe, 2 DDR4 slots, and also a 2.5 inch soldering. So to finish up, I might as well get to the thing that most people would be coming here for, which is the benchmarks. So I did try this in GTA 5, Tomb Raider, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and also Doom. So first up, here's the results of Tomb Raider, which was averaging around 50 FPS, which is definitely playable. Doesn't take advantage of the 120 Hertz panel, but definitely a playable game. And next up is GTA 5, with everything mostly on high, running at 1080 resolution. It was averaging roughly around about anywhere from about 60 to 80 FPS. As it was with Tomb Raider, it doesn't really take advantage of the 120 Hertz panel, but if you're happy to drop down some of the settings, you may be able to get it to start hitting that 120 FPS/Hertz. And then we got Csgo, which is the primary game that I play on this machine, which with a bit of tweaking and dropping of graphics settings, you will be able to get it to run pretty much close to 120 FPS constantly. Did have to change a few things down to medium to be able to hit the high hundreds, or to stay in the high hundreds. But with everything maxed out, it was generally running between about 70 up to around about 100 FPS. Granted, this will depend on what level you're in and a few other variables, but if you're willing to drop stuff down to low, you definitely will be able to take advantage of the 120 Hertz. But then the next dilemma that you've got there is what I touched on a bit earlier in the video regarding the blurring that I was saying about. Even though it's 120 Hertz, this panel does have a low response time, or high response time. So looking around quickly does tend to make stuff a bit smeary. Granted, it's still better than a normal panel, but it's not quite cracked up to what it could be. And lastly, Doom 2016, which as you can see by the footage here, it's running quite smoothly. This is with all settings maxed out at 1080. Weirdly enough, I feel like it almost runs at a higher frame rate, a consistent frame rate, than Counter-Strike Go, which being that Counter-Strike Go is running on DirectX 9 on a considerably older engine, that doesn't really surprise me. I also noticed the blurring smearing effect to be less noticeable in Doom than it was in Counter-Strike. I think that more has to come down to the colours, where in Counter-Strike there's a lot of contrasting colours, where in Doom there's a lot of dark brown, green, reds that are all fairly similar, and by default you also have the blur effect or the various levels of blur in game. Overall, to summarise my thoughts on this particular machine, which for the price that I paid for it, which was brand new for around about 1100 AUD, on special down from 1400, I was very happy with this purchase. If I purchased the retail price for this, I probably would have been a little bit more disappointed, but I find that the amount of I/O that it's got, the quality of the screen, the brightness of the screen, is let down by the pixel response time. Overall, very usable machine. A couple of quirks that I didn't like: the lack of Windows key on the bottom left hand side, the protrusive AC jack being on the right hand side near where I would commonly have my mouse. Those are definitely things that I could overlook at this price point. Granted, in the past I have had a couple of Alienware laptops, a few Dells, Razer Blade Stealth. Yes, the build quality of those ones was better and better material, but you definitely were paying a lot more compared to this particular MSI machine. So overall, relatively happy with this purchase, and I'll see how it goes for me in the future. Anyway, I hope this video has been informative and helps you get to know this machine a bit better prior to your purchase. Anyway, catch you later.